Hi, everyone. Welcome to Craft Politics. I'm Joseph Navois.
I'm Andrew Percy.
I'm Holly Mumbycroft.
Welcome to the weekly issue scan, your weekly deep dive into the most interesting political stories of the week. Today, we'll all talk about Trump's state visit to the UK and the Lib Dem attack on reform. Before we start, I do want to take a moment to thank our newest subscribers who've joined us this past week, and a big thank you to Rad Daddy 242 on YouTube, who continues to shit on us week in, week out. And to Arnest World 2750, who thinks we need to edit the interminable chat at the start of the show. Sorry, bud. It's not going to happen.
Let's can we have some more interminable chat then? So I wonder who this it should be called Sad Daddy rather than Rad Daddy, right? But I mean, it's kind of weird that someone would listen to something they hate. Where are you reading these, by the way? Because I'm not very technical.
These are on YouTube. I'm just protecting you because I don't know that your ego can handle it.
I'm incapable of finding any of this. But yeah, well, I mean, it's a bit weird that you keep listening to something you don't like. But then I suppose we kept getting elected.
Years and years in elected office has prepared us really well for this kind of feedback.
Yeah, exactly. It's Joseph we need to worry about because we're just like, man. Whereas Joseph, it probably maybe when he goes to bed at night, he cries himself to sleep to Rad Daddy's comment. Whereas we're just like, is that it? Because literally 24 years in public office, I'm like, these are fairly pathetic insults. But
I do wonder if it's just one of our friends that's just taking the piss out of us.
You don't have any friends, Joseph.
I was just about to say it won't be one of Andrew's friends because it wasn't me.
Holly.
I think we can really firmly rule that out. Guys, I've got a new mug that I'm going to be drinking out of today.
Ooh.
While we're on the show.
Oh my God.
So those who are listening, if you want to see what it is on YouTube, go on YouTube and see us in person. But it's a new Craft Politics.
Oh my
mug.
God. What a surprise.
And I did think to myself, I've got a very, very talented, very professional, very skilled co-host. So I got you one as well, Joseph.
Oh,
in this box.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll have to drink out of that.
Thanks. Look, sucking up to Joseph, I get it. It's like you think because he's got partner in his title at where we work, that makes it more important. But, he can't even get the microphones to work properly. So
yeah, what people don't realise is we have spent 15 minutes today trying to sort Andrew's tech out. Perhaps the less said about that, the better. It's as you get older, it becomes a lot harder, I think, to engage with tech. And it becomes more important to just keep trying and keep learning, keep your mind active.
Well, I'm not going to sort the tech myself, am I? That's why I have Joseph here as my assistant.
I think we're
what did you pour in that mug?
Now,
Holly, what are you drinking?
Well, that's got tea in it, but I've got some beer. I've got it's called a Pally Ale. No, I know how you say it. You say pale ale, right? Here we go.
Yeah.
And I chose it because it's got really nice pictures on it.
Great.
I'll try it.
Where's it from?
Yes, obviously.
Of course. It wasn't in S, it doesn't exist.
Well, they've got so many lovely different ones. I thought I'd just try them all.
Well, we have on this side, we're drinking Fieldhouse Salted Lime Mexican Lager. This is a brewery in the Fraser Valley out here in BC. And
that sounds really posh.
You really like Fieldhouse as well, don't you?
Yeah, I think they got good vibes. Good brewery. Have a nice little spot downtown Chilliwack.
Do you know, just to continue the interminable chat.
Yeah.
I was in California last week and I had very high expectations of very good beer. And I barely had a decent ale while I was there. It was really, really depressing.
And were you there did you have, I think you had a big birthday. Was it a birthday celebration? Something with a 0 on one end and a 5 on the other, maybe?
Screen's frozen. I certainly did not have that birthday. It was a birthday, though. I hate my birthday, so I don't celebrate my birthday. For years, my birthday wasn't on my Wikipedia page. Is it on your... Oh, you don't have one, do you, Joseph? Sorry, I just assumed that, most people I hang out with have Wikipedia pages. But I'm sorry about that. But you've probably edited somebody else's. But it wasn't on because it used to say year of birth, 1 year or another year, because I was really, really careful at not putting my age on. I was very clear I didn't want my birthday ever out. Anyway, partly because I thought, if people know your birthday, and obviously my passwords are all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I just assume that if you give people your birthday, they're going to figure everything out. But Anyway, when we were in Parliament, it wasn't on for a while. Then somebody obviously found out, because when you first get elected, all these like companies email you asking you to give you all your details. Never told anyone. And then weirdly, do you remember Keir Starmer, who was a Labour MP?
Yeah.
Some people can Google Keith Vaz. There was a scandal involving some male prostitutes and washing machines. But anyway, we'll not dwell on that. In my first year there, Keith Vaz sent me a birthday card because he used to do this on my birthday. I was like, how has this guy figured it? He used to do it to everybody, and then he'd like remember everything and would tell everyone like, it's your birthday and you get this card. It was the most strange thing, but nobody knew at that point, but he figured it out.
Is that the first time you'd ever been sent a birthday card by anyone ever?
Do you know what I do when I get birthday cards? I open them and I put them on the side and go, oh, that was nice. I'm just not good with birthdays. When I was 7, my parents rented a video recorder because obviously nobody had them back then. And we rented The Empire Strikes Back, and I cried at my birthday because I didn't like my birthday. I've never liked it since. Also, linked to that, when I was in Oregon last week, because I wasn't just in California, I went to the last Blockbuster.
Oh, it's still there?
Still there, the last Blockbuster. And do you know what? It was a really strange experience walking down the aisles. It brought back loads of memories. And I just thought, like,
DVDs?
Yeah, DVDs they had, but like it was years when I was a kid, obviously. But anyway, I went to the last Blockbuster. Is that enough interminable chat to annoy whoever that person was? I can talk about the car we rented if that helps. I've got way more of this.
Poor Rad Daddy. Rad Daddy's really pissed with us. Oh, no. It's not Rad Daddy. It is Arnis World 2750 doesn't like the internal chat.
Well, you could always fast forward it because like there's technology to allow you to do it.
That's true. That's true. All right, fast forward now. Boop. We're going to move on to our issue scan. So I talked about already, I noted at the top, we are going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive on this whole Britain, France, Canada, Portugal, and others Australia recognizing Palestinian statehood at the UN General Assembly this week. We will dig into that a little bit more deeper in the issue in the podcast that will drop later this week. So we're going to breeze over that today and focus on a couple things, and probably makes sense for us to talk about what appears to be a U-turn from Donald Trump on Ukraine and Russia. So some context for our listeners: at the UN in New York, after meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, President Donald Trump declared that Ukraine can win all of Ukraine back in its original form, which listeners would remember is a sharp shift from earlier suggestions that Kiev should consider concessions to Russia. He framed Russia as a paper tiger, said NATO EU support can deliver a full Ukrainian victory, and hinted at tougher sanctions if Moscow refuses talks. Why does this all matter? Why am I interested in this? Well, it's a major rhetorical pivot by Washington's most important voice on the war, and it raises expectations, I think, in Kiev and in European capitals, while complicating Moscow's calculus on all of this. Guys, what are you making of this? Can we even believe this, or is it just yet another random U-turn that could quickly get undone?
I mean, I think, yes, on the one hand, it's Trump, pivoting 180 degrees, and he could easily pivot another 180 degrees back the other way. I think for me, the most interesting thing about it was it all goes back to, Trump's personality, right? Which is he can't feel like he's been slighted or offended. And clearly Putin thought he'd played him beautifully, and just maybe actually, he's kind of met his match as Putin in this, like thinking that just turning up, lavishing praise on Donald Trump and all of that was going to be enough. And, clearly Trump did expect something from it. And I think the interesting thing that comes from this, and it's a bit like his speech at the UN and what he said on the campaign trail, is for all of his many, many faults in many things, I think Trump genuinely does believe in kind of peace, right? He wants to end wars. All of his things about, I want to end wars. He does seem to genuinely want to end wars. Now, that's a really lovely thought that lots of people have. Ending a war is a lot more complicated than that. But I thought, I think it's really interesting. Clearly, Zelensky has managed to charm him a bit as well. But I think just clearly people have been saying in his ear for a while now, this Putin guy's taking you as a fool. He's played you. He went back to Russia and increased the attacks, and that hasn't gone unnoticed. The fact that he was saying, NATO should shoot down, countries in Europe should shoot down Russian jets, I thought was quite an escalation. pleased he said it, because obviously we all want to see Ukraine freed. So, but I thought it was quite interesting. But just again, but it could be something different next week, right? And that's the problem here. So.
A couple of things from me. We heard Zelensky speak. He spoke in the parliamentary chamber through the electronic screens, which was, unprecedented at the time. And then he spoke as well alongside the speaker in Westminster Hall. And we were both there for that, and that was in person. I mean, he is an absolutely stunning communicator.
Yeah.
So we've seen what we've seen between him and Trump, but the quality of his ability to do that is absolutely fantastic. And then the other thing, with all these stories coming out today, Reuters are reporting on some of the gasoline shortages in some bits of Russia. I'm not suggesting they're going to run out, but there does seem to have been a bit of a shift that is starting to affect people's everyday lives. School buses perhaps not running, stuff like that. So the timing's interesting on that as well. I feel for people in Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine. I went in 2023. I was there nearly a week. And you just, like, with the changes, and like Andrew said, the 180, it's unimaginable how that must feel for an everyday member of the public in Ukraine. Seeing these changes from week to week must be incredibly difficult.
But it's clearly, though, these drone attacks and these particularly aggressive nature of them, and the fact that they targeted the British Council, and the fact that there's now been these incursions of the drones into Poland. There was the incursions of aircraft into Estonia. He's clearly up to something, is Putin. He thinks he's played Trump. And I mean, obviously we know he's up to something, but he's testing European resolve at the moment. You have to be nervous about what that might mean, but the severity of the attacks since that whole peace summit has certainly gone the other way. So, I mean, if you were the Trump administration, you should be absolutely furious with Putin. Like, you rolled out the red carpet, you gave him, sadly, a PR win. Mm-hmm. And he's treated you as a complete fool and an idiot, and has gone back and thrown more at Ukraine, attacked things that previously were seen as off the table. Is testing Europe. So, I hope it all comes terribly crashing down for Putin, and that, this is the start of and also the key thing as well was, Trump had also said, I think yesterday, that he will continue to sell kit to European nations to give to Ukraine, which was a Biden policy that I think he'd previously been a bit critical of, or there'd been questions over. That was a really important thing, because that means that at least Ukraine will continue to be, because he had in the past, there'd been talk about them cutting off their access to arms. So I think it's all a positive, but, in a week's time, Putin could tweet something nice about him and we could be in a different position again.
Well, that's my concern, is that Trump is always so quick and fast to pivot, to do a 180, to change his mind on something. So this is the view that he has today, but what's to say this can't change in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks' time? I mean, it's insane when you think about the meeting he had in the White House back in, I think, February it was Zelensky through now. So there's been that massive pivot, but what's to say that can't get undone? And I'm also concerned about the expectations around this. Is he leaving the impression that Ukraine can so easily win this thing? And and is he doing so to suggest that it, as a result, does not require as much U.S. aid or U.S. intervention or support on this, because it's a de facto done deal? Or is he saying this because the U.S. plans to actively support Ukraine on this? I don't think that's clear based off of yesterday. And I just have a hard time right now trusting that Trump is going to actively deliver on the aid side of the coin.
There's also just a bigger issue, which we've talked about before when we've discussed this subject, which is that, we're all just giving Ukraine enough to kind of hold the line, where everybody agrees that it's a complete outrage. Everybody agrees, Putin has behaved in the most appalling, disgraceful manner, is, testing Europe with this. And actually our resolve really is to keep giving Ukraine enough so that more of its fighters can continue to die without actually really getting enough, so they can hold the line, but not really enough to win the war, right? And I know dragging the rest of Europe into a conflict is, an easy thing for people like armchair commentators like us to say, but at the same time, Putin knows at the end of the day there's a limit to what Europe and the West will do. Is that really very, I don't know, isn't it a little bit cruel that we're not really giving them the stuff they really need to win this, or being prepared to, if we're as outraged as we all are, then surely there comes a point where we should just say, fuck it, you guys, everything should be thrown at you. You should be given access to everything and including NATO air support potentially to at least keep the skies clear of Russian jets and drones. But none of us are prepared to do that, even though we're all absolutely outraged. So I think before we, kind of in European countries or Canada or the UK starts kind of criticizing the Trump administration for anything, we should also question about yes, we've been unrelenting in our support, but at the same time, that support has limits as well. So I don't know, just is it very fair that we've given them enough to hold the line, but that's just meant more people have died? Not that I'm saying we shouldn't have done, obviously we had to, but I would actually now be like, we should probably go further. Because Putin's weak, right? The economy's a mess. Their military isn't, what some people thought it was. So, maybe now we just say, let's just get this job finished, or we're going to just carry on for another 3 years.
Holly, from your perspective, what are you keeping an eye on? What do you think comes next?
I don't know. I was going to say though, actually, I think you'll remember Bob Seeley, who we were both in Parliament with. He's just written his new book, The New Total War, which is all around Russia and Ukraine. I think we should talk to Bob at some point and get his views on this, because he's
Bob would
spent
be good to get
years
on,
traveling backwards and forth. He would be a great person to interview. I was just thinking that as we were speaking.
Yeah, he and I think didn't he work in the military, or was he in? I can't remember, one of the services anyway. But yeah, I mean, I just think we in a year's time are we still going to be saying, oh, we just need to give them more kit, and slowly the war just grinds on them, more people on both sides. A lot of these Russian recruits are just like people who are forced into it as well, aren't they? Anyway, we shall see.
Yeah, well, I think that's all we can do is keep an eye on the type of supports that the U.S. either does or does not provide. And I think that could give us a clear indication of just how committed Trump is. All right, let's move on to our next issue. Actually, I'm going to go to, how about, since we're on the topic of Trump, his state visit last week to the UK. So he was in the UK last week, state visit from September 16th to 18th. He and Prime Minister Keir Starmer unveiled a UK-US technology tech prosperity deal and a bundle of corporate investment pledges. The UK government touted a headline £150 billion figure. Independent tallies and press coverage put concrete name commitments in the multi-billion pound range. And a White House memo formalized the tech pact. Trump also sparked headlines urging the UK to consider military use on migration and a rift on AI taking over the world at a CEO summit. Holly, let's start with you. What was your reaction to last week's
I
state
thought
visit?
the visit went pretty well. I've got a question for you, which is are you jealous when you look over at the UK and see just how well that went? Because the management of that, considering how it might have gone and all the Epstein stuff that we were concerned might come up, and some of the conversations between Trump and Keir Starmer, let's face it went pretty well. It went without a hitch. Every time I thought, right, this cannot get any bigger or any more glitzy, massive, load of red arrows flew over the top, or a great big golden carriage came wheeling round a corner or something. I mean, it was incredible in terms of the pageantry and what the UK is able to produce. Absolutely amazing. And I think it went pretty well. And they got something shiny to point at with the tech deal. So yeah, I got to be fair. It went pretty well.
Yeah, I get that sense as well, particularly because there's something of substance that came attached to it, right? Multi-billion pounds worth of deals and commitments. So it was substantive, and it was, I think, the UK through Starmer demonstrating continued ability to stick handle Trump in a reasonable well to the extent that anyone can. But so far, the UK seems to have been doing all right, all things considered, on the Trump side.
Yeah, I think that's true.
How much of that is tangible if you're a member of the public looking on, until we actually see projects taking place and jobs appearing? I don't know how much that means to people.
I think, I think that's true. I mean, these things often, although I think I actually read a piece about this yesterday or the day before as well, which is, it's quite interesting that when Trump's last state visit was on, it was generally marred by and reported on by protests, because at that time, Trump was, the hate figure, blah, blah, blah. In the time that's passed since, his brand of politics, the populism, has only been more popular, as opposed to when he did the last state visit and the politicians won plaudits by saying they wouldn't attend things with Trump, that he shouldn't come, including many members of the cabinet who were all lined up at the big banquet at Windsor Castle, who were Labour opposition MPs then, front benchers, who were demanding that the state visit be cancelled. It's funny now how much has changed in that brand of populism is on the rise across the world. You see it with reform in the UK. So actually, one of the pieces I read was quite interesting that actually politicians have an interest now in being seen as being, in some respects, a lie. Whilst most Brits still would look at Trump and say, oh, it's Donald Trump and blah, 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 there is no doubt the issues he talks about, great freedom of speech stuff, because it is resonating with the public, kind of patriotism, secure borders. All of that now is very in vogue in a way it wasn't quite the same last time. So, you kind of like have a interest in looking like you're engaging with some of that. But what it does prove to me really is like, look, his bit with Keir Starmer was less good, although he was very well behaved, was Trump, in that press conference where, journalists were trying to needle him about things they don't agree on. The bit with the royals obviously went exceptionally well because Trump it's the one thing of having the royal family is like, it's the one thing people still seem to have a bit of awe for, and he greatly respects the royal family. So consequently, he was on his very best behaviour. There's stuff that came out of it. However, to temper it a little bit, I think a journalist asked one of his team at the end of it, like, has this visit made any difference to British influence on Donald Trump? And she said, not in the slightest.
No, but I got to come back on that and say, had that really, really gone to shit, that would have had a negative influence.
Yeah, it would have a negative influence. I think that's true. I think the ability of any of this to actually make any difference to how Trump acts, is limited. So, it's, Thatcher had huge influence over Reagan. Bush and Blair had huge, great. The relationship with Trump and a British leader is not in that same. It's not with any leader, right? Because the guy is so unpredictable, just doesn't care, right? And then you saw him at the UN General Assembly. He went full-throated in attacks on the UK and on Europe, and specifically pulled out the UK for some issues. Specifically pulled out Germany, France, I think. So all the things he was on his best behaviour for. A week later, he's at the UN. Back to his old self. Some of his criticisms are actually quite justified. But look, it went really well. There seemed to be some good stuff out of it. He clearly has a fondness for Britain because his mother was from Britain, but it's limited in what it will do for the longer term relationship and ability to influence Trump, I think.
I agree with that, but I just think that if you take it from a principle of how badly it could have gone, it could have really gone wrong. So
maybe that's the new measure of success, right? Can you avoid getting what Zelensky happened to him in the White House? And if Trump just wants to unleash on you, if he's willing to do it a week later in a different international forum, okay, fine. In return for these big tech agreements, commercial agreements, decent progression on the tariff side of things, okay, if that's just a price you got to pay, it's a price you got to pay.
It just helps that he has a fondness for the the royal family and a fondness for Britain because his mother's from there. I mean, I think technically because his mother was born there, he's technically entitled to British citizenship, right? I mean, he's British by descent. That fondness kind of like helps. But yes, it was very successful in the sense of what could have gone so badly wrong.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye on the extent to which these agreements have any meaningful impact on the UK economy. While we're not getting into today, latest numbers coming out showing that the UK economy is yet continues to be in the shitter, inflation up, even it's going to be the highest inflation rates in the G7. Starmer does need some.
I think that also probably had an impact as well, right? The Labour government is so desperate for any kind of good news that, just anything from anyone at the moment would be taken positively.
They must have been holding their breath every single second that Trump was here, because they just do not need like one more gram of hassle. Like, it's just, let's get it over with. And it's like when your family come and visit, like, let's just kind of get through this. Let's make sure everyone's got their dietary requirements. Let's make sure everyone's got the bedroom they want, and then it's all gonna be fine.
It is the first episode I think we've done since we came back for season 2 where we haven't talked about some type of scandal or resignation or staffing change. But maybe it's because I missed it.
It was
there'll probably be one next week.
Yeah, probably. It was all still against the backdrop of, the Peter Mandelson stuff, though, which again could have gone really badly wrong as well, but that just kind of went quiet.
Yeah.
Although he does, the one thing that Trump really doesn't like Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London. I'm not a big fan of Sadiq Khan's record either, but he really doesn't like it, does he? Because that's the one
So
thing
Sadiq Khan I saw a clip today of Sadiq Khan saying he lives rent free in Trump's head, which
yes,
is
he
not
does.
kind of a sentence that many of us get to say.
Yeah.
So he's
Well,
taking
it's
what he
that.
can from it, I think.
I think I've told you this before, but I once overheard a conversation between Boris and Donald Trump because his office was next door to mine when Boris was running for leader, and Trump in that call, because Boris put it on loudspeaker so I could hear everything, and in that call, Trump spent a good chunk of his time. He was president at the time. Boris was running to leader, was definitely going to be prime minister, it looked like. And he spent a whole time, did Trump, talking about Sadiq Khan. It was quite funny, the whole thing, because I always remember there's one thing I remember from it where he said to Boris, you know what, Boris, things are so bad in London. People are stabbing themselves in the streets. I was like, it was a really weird, obviously he meant talking about knife crime. It's a very serious issue, but I just imagined this idea of people were like, I can go on no more. It's like, well, it's the way he's described it, but he was obsessed. And then obviously Boris was busy trying to tell him about when he was mayor, his record was really good on crime. And it was like listening to two sociopaths have a conversation. It was quite amusing, but I was next door, so I could hear all this. But it was the most bizarre conversation I've ever overheard. But anyway, there we are. I didn't break any laws overhearing a conversation, so there we are. I shouldn't have said that.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye on how this all progresses. Let's move on to our last issue of the week. It is my favorite time in the calendar when I'm in the UK, although I'm not there this year for it, but it's political conference time. I don't know, Holly, if you want to explain to our non-UK listeners, or particularly even those in the UK who don't really actively engage in political process, what is conference season? And then we'll get into the Lib Dem version of it that happened this week or last.
I'm actually really, really underqualified to talk about this because I have deliberately never been to the Conservative Party conference.
Really?
And then after honestly, and then after quite a few years of not going, I got quite proud of it. And then I wouldn't go even if it was free because I didn't want to break my record. So I've never been. I don't think you've been very often, Andrew.
The last time, so party conference is the thing that these parties have every year where the faithful gather. Yeah. It used to be in a seaside town like Blackpool or Bournemouth or Brighton. Those are the traditional places. And you would go and stay in a B&B for 20 quid. And some, landlady who had far too much makeup on at 7 a.m. and was probably still drunk with a fag out of her mouth would then cook you a home-cooked breakfast. Off to the conference, one of the convention centres.
Where someone would spit on you on the way in.
Yeah, you get spit on by protesters on the way in, but especially when we're in government. And that's just our friends. And then, there would be the set piece speeches by most of the senior leadership, and then the big leader speech at the end of the conference normally. And then, that gets lots of coverage. All the journalists go, businesses go. It's good lobbying exercise, opportunity.
And lots of people, members as well, obviously. And loads of people who are interested in getting into Parliament. And
it's the party faithful go to rub shoulders with the leadership, and there's receptions every evening, all different ones. Generally, you try and go to the ones where you can get free food. So everyone always used to go to the NUT, which is the National Union of Teachers, because they always did a free fish and chips, even though the NUT hates the Tories. And most of them will go to every conference, right? And there's fringe events and policy discussions, all the rest of it. I haven't been since 2010. I went the first year I got elected to Parliament. And then I thought, I'm never going again as an MP, because it was just spending even more time with your colleagues, but even worse. And having to pay for the privilege.
There is as well this cliche kind of, lots of people thrown together, lots of people away from home, lots of alcohol.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, there's sometimes things go wrong.
Always things that come out of conferences, generally, which, too much booze, too much sex, I guess, for some people, and all that kind of nonsense, right? And bits of scandal and gossip and all the rest of it. So I only went once as an MP. I used to go a bit more often when I was just a party member. But now they're generally held in Manchester, Birmingham, because of the hotel spaces. So I think this year the Tory one is...
The Lib Dem one was in Bournemouth.
Yeah.
And actually, out of all of them, even though I'm not a Lib Dem, the Lib Dem one always looks like the most fun.
Yeah.
Because, Ed Davey's there leading a marching band.
Yes.
with a great big twirling baton. And like, I thought that's kind of amusing. But then when you look, like, there are party members and probably MPs, like, waving flags and cheering him on. Hemi, Badenoch, or Keir Starmer are not going to have
Do
people
that, yeah.
cheering at them as
Yeah.
they lead a marching band into conference. No way.
I've always been told the Lib Dem one is the kind of quite fun but quite weirdly bizarre, because there's like they have like a sing along where they sing all these like liberal songs, but like, you know, quite mildly like mocking it. It's very bizarre, strange, and it's like, you know, sandal wearers and muesli underwear brigade generally at the Lib Dem conference. And because they're not really seen as a party that's likely to be in government, it's kind of like their conference is always a bit of the kind of more of the fringy one. Whereas the Labour and Tory are the big ones, which also require a lot more security, I think, traditionally. So the Lib Dem one is kind of kicks it off. The SNP have one as well. Reform had its, actually, which was the first time lots of people were going to the Reform one, I think, a couple of weeks ago as well. But anyway,
that was
it's party
really
conference.
glitzy, wasn't it? That one. That
Yeah,
was
it's
like
quite,
really,
yeah,
really
they had the Jackson.
high-end.
Well, it quite might well be, but they had the Jackson 5 singing as well, or what was left of them at the Reform one.
Really?
Yeah. And apparently they just said like it was more like a party. Apparently, someone showed me a video, but it was the Jackson 5, which was apparently the Jackson 3, which I think might have just been one of the Jacksons with his two nephews. So it went from the person who told me it went from I saw the Jackson 5. I thought, well, that's strange because one of them's definitely not alive. To I saw Jackson 3, so I thought 3 of them. To then I might have seen one of them with 2 of the nephews. But anyway, they had the Jackson 3 or whatever it was singing. So it was. But people get very boozed up at these things. But the Reform one was with it. But the Lib Dem one was interesting because of the fact that Ed Davey, who's the leader of the Lib Dems, went all out on Reform, right?
I mean, his entire speech was just an attack on reform, which I found interesting because, as I understand it, the Lib Dems have been complaining that reform is consuming all the media attention. Reform is getting talked about. No one's paying attention to the Lib Dems. I think the Lib Dems have been shitting on media for not giving them appropriate coverage. And so what is the response? Is to go out and have your keynote speech. I think it had more than 40 references to Nigel Farage in it. And as I understand it, pretty aggressive positioning, trying to leave the audience and voters with the impression that a vote for Farage is a vote for Trump's America. Do you think that's going to land in that there?
I don't know what Holly thinks, but I don't think so because of the basis that everybody knows Nigel Farage is a friend of Donald Trump and has known that for years. I don't think you can tell people that more because everybody kind of already knows that.
I sort of think it's not designed to land. He's not trying to get
Interesting.
votes off reform. He's trying to hoover up every anti-reform vote
get every Labour
there is left
supporter?
that's fallen away from Labour. I assume.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think this is their strategy, is to try and build them because they got 72 seats at the last election, right? Did the Lib Dems, which is an amazing figure for them, but it's no one talked about because it was all about reform, who only got 5. But I think they got 72 seats, so they won 60 odd seats, mainly I think, or all from the Conservatives, and they did that despite getting 100,000 fewer votes than in the election before. And they won lots of those seats largely because of reform, because reform took so much of the Tory vote that they actually ended up with very few changes in votes from the election before that they lost, winning all of these seats. So I think the error the Lib Dems have made, though, if I may, is they have looked at that and thought that there's this bunch of moderate Conservatives who they can hoover up. And there's a whole group of people who still voted Conservative who are moderates, who are just waiting for someone who's going to be the kind of voice of moderate Middle England. And first of all the evidence suggests that they actually won these seats because the Tories lost more votes to Reform in those constituencies than they did to the Lib Dems. Overwhelmingly more went to Reform than the Lib Dems. Magical kind of Tory middle voter. The people who still vote Tory in 2024, who they're hoping to now target, have more in common with Reform than they do with the Lib Dems, if you look at the polling on this. So I think they're kind of misrepresenting that a bit. Not misrepresenting, but I think they're barking up the wrong tree on this. But look, Labour's vote is for. They've clearly seen a place on the kind of centre and left to say, and even moderate right, hey, we're the moderate progressives, we're the only people who can stop reform. I think the problem is that for all the number of seats they've got, they did only get 7 or 8% of the vote in the last election, or was it 10 or 11 maybe? I can't remember the exact number. I'll have to go look it up now. But they got a lot of seats, but it was on split voting. So I'm not sure really for the most of the public they're going to take them all that seriously as the kind of, if you don't want reform, vote Lib Dem. But
Does
they
it
have,
work as well? Like, from your point of view, because you're much better at this than me, does it work to bolt themselves on in the press to Nigel Farage like they've done? Because it's all over the press today and all of it is around how many times he said the words Nigel and Farage. But does that help them with that issue of not getting the coverage?
yeah, well, there is a bit of like, never talk about your opponents too much, right? So in many ways, given that probably what's left of the Tory vote is more likely to vote Reform than to vote Lib Dem, if you look at the polling, in many ways they could be helping convince even more people to go over to Reform.
Because they probably hoovered up a lot of the Conservative votes they could hoover up, they hoovered up in 2024.
Yeah. They got, I'm just looking what they got. They got 12.2% of the vote. That was it, I think, did the Lib Dems.
Right. I'm compelled by your point, though, Holly, which is if you assume the Lib Dems have a limited ability to scoop up any more conservative votes, they do want to drive contrast and position themselves as the direct opposite choice to reform in a way that Labour is stumbling to do right now. And so if the calculation is actually let's convince a lot of Labour voters who may be disgruntled with the current government to come on our side because we are best positioned to fight Farage, I think maybe it does potentially make sense to actually go out as hard as Davey has, because he's got nothing else going for him as far as I can tell right now. Like, he's just been out of the picture. So why not newsjack or hijack the news agenda? If everyone wants to talk about Farage and reform, fine, I'm going to do it so that I'm at least getting some airtime.
I think the Lib Dems are right to do that and set themselves up as that. I think, sorry, maybe I didn't make it clear. I think where they're making a mistake is in doing that, their pitch seems to be to moderate conservative voters. That's who they're obsessed with. So their attacks are still on the conservatives. It's very much, come over to us. We're the moderate, sensible, middle of the road people who are not the Tories and are not the who are perhaps going to flirt with Nigel Farage. I think they're wrong on that, though, because all those moderate, lefty kind of conservative votes had probably gone already at the last election, or even actually possibly in the last 2 elections before that. So actually, they should really be going after Labour votes much more aggressively. So I would have spent so much more time at that conference if I was them, attacking the Labour government for its failure, because it's Labour voters who are probably more accessible to them than what's left of the Tory vote. But they seem to, because the Lib Dems have this obsession with, they're seen as a party in the middle, but they're really most of them motivated by not liking the Tories, right? By hate of the Tories. That's why they go into politics as a Lib Dem, is not to fight Labour, it's really to fight Tories. But I think their target is the wrong set of voter, in that they think that they can just go after a load of moderate Tories. I don't think those moderate Tories really exist. People who would class as a moderate actually still have strong views when it comes to migration and lots of these other issues that Farage is talking about. So they'd be much better really going hard on Labour and its failure to deliver, I would have thought. But that's just my humble opinion.
Or just go in general terms for any anti-reform vote.
Yeah,
wherever it comes from.
But they pitched it very much as, if you're a moderate Tory, vote us to stop reform. That seems to be a lot of what their narrative is, and I think that's kind of wrong. So they should have probably spent a bit of time, rather than 40 references to Farage, going on about, the failures of the Labour government, because those voters, people who voted Labour in 2024, are probably very accessible to them at this moment in time, but they didn't really seem to land that as a message.
Well, speaking of Labour, super quick, I'll start with you, Holly. I think that we got the Tory conference and the Labour conference coming up shortly. What do you think either, if not both of those leaders need to focus on in their keynote speeches?
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess Keir Starmer needs to focus on politically surviving it and getting out the other end with nothing going hideously, awfully wrong.
Sideways.
So if I was him, I would make it as short as he possibly can and have a conference that lasts about, say, 40 minutes. And then get off home. And Kemi, crikey, what will be really interesting is who actually goes to the Conservative conference, because I've spoken to loads of colleagues and former colleagues who just aren't going to go.
I remember going to the one when
morale
Liz
is so
Truss
low.
was briefly prime minister. Oh, it was like going to a funeral. I cannot even imagine what it's going to be like this year.
Yeah, I mean, I presume the Labour conference will be all about what are the people who are the names, like Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, what's he up to? What are the people who might be replacing? Is Angela Rayner there? You know, who's she with? You know, it'll all be about the intrigue of what are the people who are in the potential replacement camp of Keir Starmer, what are they up to? So it'll be all that intrigue. For the Tory conference, I mean, just like Holly said, I kind of don't know. It's a bit of like, will Kemi survive is what lots of people seem to talk about. It doesn't seem to be much going on at the moment to suggest there's a formal to get rid of her anytime soon. Possibly they're going to wait till after next year's local elections, see how terrible those are. But I think for
That's exactly the
Conservatives,
same as what we're hearing out the Labour Party, because I've heard that multiple times over the last week to 10 days. Let's see what happens in May, various elections that are taking place. It feels like it's similar for both of them.
yeah, and actually, if you're like, you know, if you are a Labour or a Conservative MP, probably you think actually next May things are not, even if you change leader now, things are not going to improve drastically. So next May we have Scottish parliamentary elections, Welsh Senate elections, and a lot of English local elections. Reform in one poll for Wales this week were actually leading in Wales now and likely to be the biggest party. Things can change, of course, against Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party. But you probably actually just be kind of, let's just let them wear the bad results next year. You know, maybe if you're going to replace, you replace after that, and then they take all that with them. Yeah, I'd had thought that some in the Tory parliamentary party might move against Kemi now because the Tory party loves to have a leadership contest. But
yeah, it's not fair if Labour are getting a new deputy and we're not having a leadership contest of our own, is it? I mean, that's just unfair.
Also, it's been a while now, right?
Equal leadership contests
it's
for
been
all.
a year, 2 years early. So,
An eternity.
so we can't really,
Well, it'll be interesting to see who else speaks and who else. A lot of it will be about who else speaks at the conference. Certainly at the Conservative Party conference, whether that's at fringe stuff or whether it's kind of at the main conference and how well they do or don't do and how well it's received by members. And there'll be a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a lot of focus on Robert Jenrick, who weirdly seems to have been quite quiet of late. Am I missing something? Maybe it's because I've been in national parks. I was on holiday last week. Maybe it's he seems to be a bit quiet, but yeah, I mean, it's not a happy time anyway. If you're going to the Labour or the Tory conference, it's not a happy time. And the strange thing about this is, ordinarily, if the government of the day is down to 15%, the other opposition party should be having an absolutely incredible conference, right? But instead, they're also languishing in the late teens in polling or low 20s. So it sucks to be Labour or a Conservative at the moment, which is probably why the Lib Dems quite enjoyed the batting
Depends
twirling.
how you want to. You want to say it's opposition in regards to polling. They did have a pretty good conference.
Yeah. Oh, they did. But the official opposition, ordinarily, the party with the second most seats in Parliament, should be overjoyed at this moment if the government of the day is down to 20% or less in some polls. But it's not. It's just a shit time for both of them. You're not going to conference this year, though?
No, I'm not. I do enjoy it, though, if only because it's so different than how we do. We call them conventions in Canada, but the conventions here are so scripted. They're so predictable. The whip is very tight. You don't give media access to your party base or your supporters. It's very, very scripted, very controlled. And as a result, I find incredibly boring. I was shocked when I went to my very first Tory conference in Manchester in, I think it was 2019 or 2020. And I couldn't believe that media were mixing around with all the participants. I couldn't believe you had all these fringe events. You had all these Tory adjacent or conservative adjacent groups that were there hosting panel conversations or discussions on public policy issues, like trying to put forward different policy solutions that weren't sanctioned by the party, but just this open dialogue. And the fact that reporters could sit in on almost all of these, and it was just mind-blowing to me. It's just such a different way of doing it. And I prefer it. I think it's much more grassrootsy. I think it's far more fun to participate in. And yeah, but I'm not going this year.
But you don't get out much, do you, though? So for you, that was probably really fun. For me, it was like, oh, this is all. But I mean, actually, what you always used to get was what the week after when Parliament would come back, there'd always be ongoing gossip about, what had happened and who was seen like at 3 a.m. in a bar, going back to their room with somebody who wasn't their husband, partner, or even of the same sex or gender as their apparent partner. And there would always be these, the whips would be deployed around the bars to watch over and to try to intervene if colleagues had had too much. And there'd always be, and the certain names would come up, wouldn't they, Holly, every time of like,
Yeah, and actually, like this is one of the parts that I really do miss from a very sort of selfish point of view. Hearing the sort of light-hearted end of that was
All
pretty
the gossip.
interesting. I thought, Joseph, you need to go and just represent the three of us and do lots of looking and listening and take part and film and come back and tell us all the gossip.
Maybe next year. Maybe we should take the podcast and the show next year on the road. Well, we've talked a good chunk on conferences. Let's close us out. Lipstick on a gerbil. You have a
by the way, I definitely recall when we talked about not calling it lipstick on a pig, because that's quite nasty, that we were definitely going to think of a different animal every week, but you two appear to have settled on lipstick on a gerbil.
Well, that's what happens when you bail on us 10 minutes into the show last week. We make some exact decisions and we move on.
Sorry, I was on holiday.
Do you want to call it something else? We're not going to do it, and we're not offering that, but just out of interest, do you want to? If you've got something in your mind.
You two do whatever it is you've done. I mean, I know it's only a matter of time till I'm asked to just come on occasionally on this podcast.
What's also going to happen is I know how to do the tech.
Yeah, well, you know how to, she does not know how to do the tech. Anybody watching or listening to this, literally before this, her exact question was, what is share screen? That's what you asked. What is share screen? And Joseph had to explain because I don't know either.
So
we're not brilliant, are we? But I think I can do it. And not only can I do it, we don't even have to stop recording. I think I can just do it. But do you want me to explain first?
Yes. Yeah, because I think the topic is migration, one in, one out deal. So not everyone's going to have the full context on what we're looking at.
Absolutely fine. So this is a woman called Liz Kendall. She's Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. She's been an MP since 2010. So she was around... I don't know if you know her, Andrew.
I do. Yeah, I've gotten very well with Liz.
So she's a really experienced communicator. She's been interviewed by Nick Ferrari on LBC, which is always a bit...
feisty.
Not easy, I think, for politicians often, to talk about this new Labour, new with a lowercase n, not a capital N, plan for the one in, one out immigration deal, which essentially would mean the deal is with France. If 10 migrants came over illegally on a boat, we would, as in the UK, would send those 10 migrants back and France would swap for 10 migrants that we'd agreed to take, which presumably they would send on an aeroplane. Does that sound right to you, Andrew?
Yeah, I never really understood.
You pulled a face.
Yeah, no, I pulled a face because I always thought it was a complete nonsensical policy that was never going to happen because it would rely on the French actually maintaining their part of the deal, and they haven't previously proven themselves very reliable.
It hasn't even reached that level of problem because it's just been so wobbly from legal points of view and the absolutely inevitable legal challenges that were always going to happen. So she, and of course we had immigration is such a huge issue in the UK and we didn't really get a chance to talk about it, but this was just a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, I think, after the Unite the Kingdom march that happened in London, which was well over 100,000 people. I mean, we looked at the images and tried to sort of guess how many people it was, but it was a huge amount of people.
People have claimed everything from 1 million to 100,000 to probably 150, maybe 200, whatever. But it was a big march of people with flags, very much in contrast to some of the other demonstrations that there's been in recent years. And, organised by a far-right activist, Tommy Robinson. But, again, just proving how this migration issue is so toxic and so kind of in people's minds at the moment. But so
to cut a long story short, she's talking about legal bids, appeals, the difficulties of getting this system to work. So I will play it now.
I agree with that, Nick. I don't. This is an interim judgment about one person, an interim judgment about one person. And it is not going to stop this deal going ahead to give a very clear message that if you come to this country illegally, you can and you will be deported. I'm sure you'd love me to comment on, or any of us to comment on every single flight and who's on and who's not on.
When will the first person actually leave this much lauded one in, one out deal?
You will have to forgive me for not giving a running commentary on this, but this
will it
is
be
an
this
important.
Month?
It is well, Shabana, I am sure, bringing her A game to this, as she calls it, as she does with everything else.
Indeed,
but we're working to make sure this happens as soon as possible.
I'll have a bet with you for charity, £100. I'll give you £100 for every person this month. £100 for every person. Money to your charity, money to my charity. Why are you prepared to do for every person who leaves this country? £100, Secretary of State.
The only thing I only bet on is, as we did since we were quite young with my mum and dad, was the Grand National. I'm not going to be doing a bet. I'm not asking. We're going to make this work. It won't be a silver bullet. There are other actions that we're going to take. And watch.
You're a plain speaking lass. You know my mum was raised in Leicester. You can't pull the wool over my eyes. It ain't going to work, Liz. The one in, one out deal is.
All right. So our rating system, as a reminder, 3 coats of lipstick is incredible comms work. 2 coats of lipstick, solid effort, but still some visible issues. 1 coat of lipstick, barely concealing the problem. No lipstick, the gerbil, the pig, whatever animal you want, is fully visible. Andrew, you go first.
Well, first of all, that bet doesn't really work, does it? Because he pays £100 for every migrant sent. But how does she pay his charity then? Is it for £100 for every migrant not sent? That's like hundreds of thousands of people potentially. Anyway, leaving that aside, I mean, I think, look, she did a good job, right? Actually, I think she actually did quite a good job, because this whole policy is just clearly like, I think it was an Eritrean man they were trying to deport back. Proves the point that we had when we were in government, that it doesn't matter. We can pass primary legislation, we can sign all these deals, but everything keeps getting clogged up by the courts, who keep pulling out the Human Rights Act and the equalities legislation, all the rest of it, to stop the government and Parliament doing what it is the government and Parliament has actually voted to do. So I feel a bit sorry for the government on this. However, they did introduce that legislation. But it's just like, this is why all of this stuff on migration, until you deal with this human rights issue, is not going to change, which is why he's right, is Nick Ferrari, that I don't think this is ever going to really work, right? But how does she do? I thought, look, she's very charming, and she managed to get away without actually ever having to say what day it was, when this would actually start, by just kind of bantering with him a bit. So I think she did a pretty good job, actually, because I came away from that like, not actually. We've seen worst examples of people avoiding a question. She did it with some charm, so I think she did good. So I'm going to give. It
didn't make me cringe.
No, it wasn't cringe.
Of performance.
You're going 3,
and
I think she did great, right? Because she. Wow. I came away from that thinking she's a lass from Leicester, she's got a bit of charm about her, and blah blah blah. So there you are.
I like the bit towards the end where she's literally like, the interview's not over, she's still sitting there answering questions, and she's picking her stuff up. She's got a coffee cup in her hand. She's like ready to walk out the second this finishes.
I mean, the fact that the government isn't able to say when it will remove, although it hasn't one now actually been removed, I can't remember, but the fact that we're on to 1 or 2 when there's like hundreds of people a day coming some days illegally. So I thought she did.
At the beginning when she was going like that, and I was thinking, wow, that's like pretty bold. She's like really getting her finger in Nick Ferrari's face. Perhaps she was suggesting, she was trying to say 1. Yeah, maybe actually, rather than pointing at him. I was like, wow, that's so rude. Yes. She went full school teacher.
She, of course, ran the Labour leadership when Jeremy Corbyn won. And she was a hater of the Corbynistas because she was from the right of the party. So she was seen as kind of like, a traitor. But anyway, what did you think, Holly?
How many coats are you giving, Holly?
I won't give it 3. I give it like 1, because although she did a decent job, and I'm not cringing at her attempt at all, she came over like very human, pretty warm. She wasn't flustered, all of that stuff. It absolutely did not cover up the issue 1% for me, because this stuff is really, really hard. I mean, how many times have we had that conversation with people where essentially you're very honest and say, if this stuff was really easy to fix, it would have been fixed. It's a really difficult issue.
Well, Donald Trump say, that's the one thing he did say when he was in the UK, which is a bit controversial, we should just use the military to stop this. But no one's laughing now at Trump because he hasn't cut illegal migration into the US. Anyway, that's a side issue.
Joseph, in terms of communicating, you're an expert. How do you rate that?
I'm giving it 1, maybe 1.5. I do agree that she comes off incredibly charming and authentic, and she's able to roll with the punches. And you can see how her charisma and her personality disarms the reporter quite well. I just think she could have, it's a tough position to be in. You're defending something that's very difficult to defend because you don't have evidence yet that you've delivered on your commitments. So I would have considered, is there not an enemy? Could she not have pivoted and point blame on someone or something else? Could she actually make the courts the enemy in this and position the government as we're doing everything we can, come hell or high water, to fix this? But we got people who, and other forces that are getting in our way.
Well, washed her. I mean, the public don't care about that. You blame the courts, are like, you're the government, you should just do it.
That's interesting because that works well here in Canada.
Yes.
Not all the time, but there is a sense, particularly, and maybe it's a question of which audience you're speaking to and the type of voter you're speaking to. And so obviously on the right side of the spectrum here in Canada, there's been a long-standing view that the courts always get in the way of what the government is trying to do on behalf of the majority.
Yes. I mean, there is that in the UK, and I used to use that line with constituents when they would write to me about this, because it was true, right? Which is saying that, we are bound by the courts are independent, all the rest of it. But it just, in the UK, people, I think, particularly people who care about this issue, are just like, that doesn't wash now, right? They're like, and even when we actually did pass primary legislation to make this happen, and there's supposed to be no court higher than the High Court of Parliament, we were still restrained. So I think people are just kind of run out of governments having excuses, even though it's a legitimate excuse to say, well, the courts have literally prevented us doing this. We can't go against the independent court processes. And people clearly do now start, I think a lot of people on the right see the courts as a problem. They see them as left wing. But coming back to this, though, I think that Nick Ferrari clearly quite likes Liz as well. So I think that probably helped her get away with it a bit. But I've seen far worse examples of ministers be harangued and then sort of stutter and do all that kind of thing. Whereas she just kind of breezed her way through it. So I thought she did quite well, even though she didn't answer the questions.
Answer the questions as well. She didn't avoid the questions, which really, really winds people up, I think. She did answer the questions.
I just Liz as well, so maybe that's it. I'm being a bit...
I revise. You guys are convinced. I'll revise my rating.
I think the thing is, I'm just a nice person. And I think that's what... I just see the good in everyone. And I think that's probably why I am...
Do you want to say something really nice about me and really nice about Joseph then before we go? Let's prove what a nice man you are.
You have wonderful hair, as do both of us.
It's true.
Joseph is a colleague who I value.
Rely on.
What should I say about Joseph?
Tech support.
Well, no, because this has got a massive, what's it called, echo in it. So
cool.
I've had to hear you twice throughout, which is horrendous. But anyway, for you, it's been a delight because you've got to hear these dulcet whole turns twice.
Interminable chat, which is probably our cue to end it there, guys. So a reminder, if you haven't already, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are uploading additional shorts and segments. So if the daily or the weekly episodes are long to get through, we do have shortened clips for you to enjoy on the YouTube channel. And don't forget to find us on Substack. Just go to craftpolitics.fm, where we can make the episodes available to you in your inbox. And at some point, some of us will start posting some additional notes and thinking on that channel as well.
Yeah, now I know what it is.
Sorry, that was not a tee up for you to talk again. I think we have to bring the show to an end.
Wow. Well, but it seemed like you were ending on a personal attack. So I just think that's really cruel and nasty. But then again, I am a good person.
All right, Holly, thanks for putting up with us yet again. And thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. Take care.